Alright, so last week I put out a video talking about using dry fire practice to maintain and even better your skills while all this stuff is going on. The quarantine, the ammo shortages, the panic buying, all that. Using dry fire practice to maintain and better your precision rifle skills. So today I want to talk about breaking down the fundamentals of marksmanship so that when you are dry fire practicing, you know what you need to concentrate on. You know the proper processes, a pre-shot and a post-shot checklist, and why what you're doing works the way it's supposed to. So let's get into it here. So the very first thing that you're going to do when you set the rifle down on the ground is you are going to get in a solid position. You're going to line up straight behind the rifle. You see a lot of videos of guys cocked at a 90-degree angle or a 45-degree angle or a 30-degree angle or something crazy. That actually may work for the people that have done that all their lives and have trained themselves to shoot that way, but it is not the proper way. You want to lay as straight behind the rifle as you can. You want that rifle to be a part of you, and when that rifle recoils, that rifle does not recoil to the side or down or anything like that. That rifle recoils straight back. So if you are in a perpendicular line with that rifle will recoil into you, and when you see your crosshairs move upon recoil, they will move in a straight line. They should move slightly up, not to the side or anything like that. When you are laying behind the rifle and you have a solid position, that rifle should recoil straight back into you, and the crosshairs should stay parallel with the target. So that is the first thing. Laying behind the rifle perfectly straight, and then you want to have a widen your feet, widen your stance basically behind the rifle. Have your feet spread out a little bit. Instead of being just laying straight back, you want them to be widened out so that you have a more solid position that actually helps you push into the rifle. So next, once you have laid down, you are solid behind the rifle in a straight line with the rifle, you want to build a stable position with that rifle. So that means you want to take your rear bag, you want to make sure that it is completely solid, and that when you lay behind that rifle, that while the rear bag is solid and in the proper spot, that everything lines up. So you have it as solid as it can be as the crosshairs are lining up on your target. And you can use your bipod to adjust the height of your bipod to adjust the vertical of your crosshairs to line up on that target. So that is the second part of this, which is building a solid and stable position. You want it to be as solid as possible so that when you are behind that rifle and when you imprint your body onto that rifle, as you push your shoulder into it, the rifle should be like an extension of you, and you should impart very little onto that rifle. The third thing that you want to do after you have laid straight behind the rifle, you have built a solid and stable position, then you want to pull that rifle into your shoulder as you push forward. Because you have your feet widened and your stance widened, you will actually be able to push your body forward into that rifle a little bit, causing a little bit of what's called preload on the bipod. So you will actually be pushing onto the bipod, which will in turn push that rifle into you. And so as you push forward, you also will use, every rifle that I shoot, you will notice that I have some sort of what's called a butt hook. So this piece right here, I use that piece, and it can be done many different ways. You don't have to use the butt hook, but I actually use the butt hook in junction with holding my bag with my left hand, because I'm a right-handed shooter, and on the grip of the rifle, I use my trigger hand to also pull back into me. Now, I don't want it to get confused. You do not want to just absolutely muscle the rifle into your shoulder. You want to have a solid, firm grip on that rifle and pull it solid into your shoulder, but you don't want to be muscling it to the point where you're just shaking, because that is going to make it so that you cannot get a proper sight picture. So you want to pull the rifle to your shoulder as solidly as you can without inducing shaking or a funny sight picture, the crosshairs moving. So when you're pulling that rifle into your shoulder, also, the heavier recoiling that rifle is, the more solid you want to hold that rifle. So like say this 6 Creedmoor here, it's not a huge deal, don't get me wrong, I still hold this rifle completely solid, but it is not as big a deal to have a little less firm pull on this rifle as it is, say, this 7 SAUM here, especially when I don't have a brake on this. Like if I'm using it for like F-class and there is no brake on this rifle, it is much more important that I have a really solid, firm grip pulling that rifle into my shoulder very tightly so I can induce as little movement as possible. And it actually sounds a little silly when you talk about shooting F-class, because if you watch the guys that shoot F-class, they shoot almost a free recoil type of shooting where they impart as little bit of themselves on the rifle as possible and let the rifle break the same way every time. I have not. The way that I shoot and the way that most people shoot a tactical style of precision shooting is to induce as little movement in the rifle as possible, and that's the way that I shoot. So when I shoot an F-class match, I'm a lot of the times contrary to a lot of the other guys that are shooting, because they are shooting in a more free recoil type of shooting, whereas I am shooting a more tactical type of shooting, but I can still, even doing that, perform just as well as most of the people shooting there. So if you do it right, you do it the same every time, you impart the same amount of pressure, the same stance, the same lining up straight behind the rifle, and impart the same amount of forward pressure and rear pressure. If you do everything the same every time, it doesn't matter if you're letting the rifle do the work or if you are imparting yourself onto that rifle and causing as little movement as possible. You're going to get the same results as long as you have a good load that performs the same with each shot. The next thing that you want to do, once you have built a solid position, once you have made sure the rifle is pulled into you solid, all the first 3 fundamentals that we have talked about, the next thing, and one of the most overlooked things when you hear people talk about a precision rifle fundamental checklist, is check your bubble level. You will not see me shoot a precision rifle that does not have a bubble level on it. And there's a very good reason for that. Even at 100 yards, if you have your bubble level, and once you get to the point where you can actually shoot to the point where you can really shoot tight groups, quarter-minute groups, you will actually be able to see the difference in having that rifle slightly cocked one way or the other. And if that bubble isn't in the same place every time, you will actually be able to see that even at 100 yards on the target. And it doesn't take much of an angle for it to impart that onto the target. And the further you go out, the more that angle of being off center imparts itself onto the target. So you want to, before you get ready to break that shot, make sure you concentrate on that bubble level and make sure everything is lined up in the first 3 fundamentals, as well as making sure your bubble is in the center and you have that rifle completely level. And you want to do that every time. You want to make it a habit as you're dry firing every time before you break the shot to check your bubble level and make sure it is still straight. So once you have got to this point, and actually I also want to say, if you want to see more on a bubble level, the Long Range Shooters of Utah Bryce from the Long Range Shooters of Utah did a great video on this a few years back on why bubble level is important. I think it's called Why Every Rifle Should Have a Bubble Level. And in that video, he breaks down the use of a bubble level, and he actually shows it shooting at distance, and just as he moves the rifle very slightly each way, how much that actually imparts the trajectory onto the target. So it's really impressive, and it's a really good source of information for why bubble level works as good as it does. So once you are to that point and you have run through all those steps, you should actually be completely comfortable behind the rifle. Even though you have it pulled into your shoulder, you're pushed into the rifle, and you have everything solid, you should feel so comfortable and laying straight behind the rifle that you should almost be able to fall asleep. You should literally be able to close your eyes, count to 5 after you are lined up on the crosshairs, and have a solid enough position built that when you close your eyes, count to 5, and then reopen your eyes, your crosshair should still be lined up in the same exact spot. And that is a good solid position. That is a position ready to fire. So once you're to that point, now you're ready to break the shot. And this is a part where you see a lot of people make a lot of mistakes. So breaking the shot, can be just as much problems caused in breaking the shot as there can in any other part of it. Triggers have a wall, so you're going to want to put your finger on the trigger, impart pressure on that wall. Put your finger on the trigger like in a 2-stage. You're going to want to bring the first stage all the way to the wall very slowly, and then once you have got to that wall, continually add slight bits of pressure until that trigger breaks and you break the shot. And you want to have just like the rifle lining up completely straight with you, you want to be pulling that trigger straight to the rear so that everything comes straight to the rear and that rifle can recoil straight back. So as you get set up behind the rifle, get your finger on the trigger, slowly impart rearward pressure straight to the rear and slowly break that shot. And a lot of guys say it should surprise you that once you have gotten used to a trigger and you know how much pressure it takes to really break that shot, it's really not going to surprise you as much. So once that trigger has broke, you don't want to, like you see a lot of guys when they break the trigger, completely jump off of it. So as soon as they feel the trigger break, they completely let off that trigger. You absolutely do not want to do that. You want to have what's called follow through. So as you pull that trigger straight to the rear, and as that shot breaks straight to the rear, you actually want to follow through. And that, you wouldn't think that really matters, but it absolutely does. That ensures that you are pulling the trigger straight to the rear and imparting nothing but rearward pressure. And as you have that follow through, so if you are to press a trigger and as soon as it breaks, you let off, that's just kind of like jerking the trigger. So even though you may not see it, you may actually, when you do that, jerk the trigger and right at the last second cause your crosshairs to jump off target. So that is a big part of this, is follow through. And then the last part of this is part of your post-shot checklist, along with your follow-through, is going to be, if you're just doing one shot, this doesn't matter, but you want to maintain your cheek weld throughout your entire shooting. So if you plan to shoot a 5-shot group, you should never, once you get lined up, once you build that solid position, you lay your cheek on the cheek riser, on your cheek rest, you should never break that cheek weld until you're done shooting that group. Your cheek should stay welded to that stock in the same exact position throughout your entire group. You hear people say that once I have my parallax set, it doesn't matter. If I have my parallax set just right, it doesn't matter wherever if I can take my cheek off and put it back on, and I'm going to be in the same spot. Having your parallax set does make a difference, but it will not leave you in the same spot every time. Every time you break your cheek weld and go back, it may be ever so slightly, but you are in ever so slightly of a different spot, and those crosshairs are lined up ever so slightly in a different spot on the target, which in turn will absolutely open up your group size. So those are the pre-shot and post-shot things that you need to think about, and you can do all these through your dry fire practice and absolutely improve your skills. So I hope, if I didn't leave enough information the other day on talking about dry fire, this will give you guys something to work with as you practice your dry firing while we're all quarantined to our houses and whatnot. So I'll see you guys next time. I'm out.